Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And before I forget, I wanted to tell you all that this Sunday we're probably going to be getting together, bar major emergency or something, with Venger Satanis and Grim Jim to have another issue of Inappropriate Characters. So if you're not familiar with Inappropriate Characters, be sure to check out that channel and to subscribe to it. I mean, if you like my live streams, and apparently a lot of you do, you should check them out too, because the Inappropriate Characters has the three of us engaging in banter about, the gaming hobby and controversies therein, which I find a lot of fun, and I hope you do too. We do a lot of audience interaction. So check that out. It'll be on Sunday, and it'll probably be, I think, at 7:30 Central Time, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, on to the topic at hand, which is probably what drew you here. The Bard is the source of all evil in D&D. That might be a slight exaggeration, but I'm going to explain to you why I feel that way. So, if you've played Bards, this is not going to be a video about how annoying people who play Bards are. We all know that. We've all seen that happening. And but it is a thing. Here's the basic premise of my argument, right? In every version of the Bard, the effect the Bard has had on mechanics and on implied setting has been worse than the previous version. In each version, they've been bad. They've just kept causing more and more trouble, right? And we all know that the way that the people who play Bards tend to behave, the way that they tend to be bad. So it's not going to be about that. But I know that, you know and we all know what the Bards are like. So here's the thing about the Bard is that it's not the earliest subclass, but it is the earliest class that ends up introducing certain concepts that will end up being big detriments to D&D in the future. A little side note, when I was consulting for 5th edition, I tried really hard to convince Merles that we should just have 4 classes, fighter, thief, cleric, wizard, and that everything should be done within those 4 classes, right? That you should have ways that people can make their character what they want within those classes, modify them somewhat, but not to have like special subclasses, and definitely not to have prestige classes. And obviously I didn't quite, win that argument, though I was glad that at least in the starter set, you had those, 4 basic classes. So anyway, the Bard comes up after, the early period of D&D, the original box set and what have you, where there were those, those classes. In fact, in the very earliest D&D, there was just 3, fighting man, cleric, and wizard, and then the thief shows up slightly later. But basically completes the balance of those 4 most significant archetypes of the game that everything else, like, they're the 4 cardinal points, right? Everything else tends to be a derivative of those 4 in some way. So I tend to prefer to make the derivative internal rather than external, though there are some exceptions. Like, in Lion and Dragon, I do have a couple of things that amount to being kind of like ethnic class, right, for a barbarian type and a kind of traveler type. And in the Old School Companion, I introduced some NPC classes that are clearly meant to be subclasses in a certain way, right? Like the archer being a subclass of the warrior, and then the various type of experts like the craftsman, the priest, etc., that are not really meant to be fighting classes, but are meant to help the DM if they want to develop a higher level character that is not of a fighting career or an adventuring career. So I'm not an absolutist on any of this, but I notice a certain trend that happened. And when the Bard shows up in the Player's Handbook, by the time the 1st edition Player's Handbook comes along, you have a whole bunch of subclasses in there. You've got, like, the Ranger and the Paladin, and I don't think any of those are good, right? Like, I think that they're all bad conceptually, right? The Paladin, for example, basically is what the cleric was originally meant to be. Like, the cleric is the crusading, miracle-making priest warrior, right? Not the Paladin. So adding the paladin just compounds something, and it then reduces the cleric into, like, by second edition, it reduces the cleric into being just a priest, right? So that any priest would supposedly be able to do the divine magic that a cleric does. That wrecks things, right? And it's something I rectify in my Lion and Dragon, my Dark Albion setting, and the implied setting of Lion and Dragon and the Old School Companion, where the clerics are special militant order of holy warriors, and the average church priest doesn't have miracles, right? Anyway, and then you had like the monk, but I mean, you can't even really care about the monk because the monk is just so obviously anachronistic. It's not even like an actual Buddhist monk from medieval China or something like that. It's like literally the monks from the Kung Fu series, and so like what they're doing there, who knows, right? But the Bard wasn't in the section with all of those classes. It was way back in the appendix of the Player's Handbook, in one of the appendices of the Player's Handbook. And it's a very specialized prestige class. You have to like dual class in 3 different classes and have certain requisite stats to be able to become a Bard. And then the Bard gets a whole bunch of special benefits. So this is problem number 1, the mechanical problem, that this is basically the birth of the prestige class. Where if a player knows how to manipulate the rules and manipulate their character path, they'll unlock special powers. And that was bad for D&D. It's also bad conceptually, right? The cleric in the first edition is technically the least bad of the conceptual problems, or the setting, kind of implied setting problems, but it still is immediately an implied setting problem because the Bard doesn't know what it is. Like, it's this multi-class thing that goes through this whole career of being, several other classes first, and then it becomes this bizarre mix between a jongleur, a troubadour, and a bard, right? You think you know what a bard is. Some of you probably do, but most of you, probably when you think of a bard, what you think of is a guy in like kind of fancy sort of medieval dress in a tavern playing on a lute, and kind of like a bearded guy with a goofy grin playing some love song on a lute, trying to charm some damsel, and drinking too much wine, and getting into all kinds of hijinks. and you think, yeah, that's a bard, right? No, that's not a bard. That's a troubadour or a jongleur, depending on whether he's more acrobat and juggler or more musician. But a medieval entertainer was a troubadour or was a jongleur or something like that. A bard wasn't those things. The bard was an early medieval concept that was a keeper of lore and a storyteller, but not for entertainment, but rather for very serious kind of social purposes, that was a descendant of the ancient, pagan remainders from the Celtic society, and supposedly traceable back towards the ancient, long dead druids. So that's what the bards were, like Taliesin was a bard, right? These were very important sort of quasi-religious figures, and they weren't guys playing dirty songs with lutes in taverns. Those were somebody else, right? They'd come from a completely different source. And in the first edition version of the Bard, they don't know which one of the two it is. By the second edition, they've at least solved both of those things. It's no longer a weirdo prestige class. They make it into a regular subclass, and they make the Bard very definitely the creepy beardo playing music in the tavern. The problem there is then that you have all of a sudden this subclass of thief that also happens to have magic and is super cool, and is like the one that inevitably the annoying player is going to want to play if they don't have kenders, which were another one of the terrors of second edition era. And they also begin to introduce, to replace some of the stuff that they took out, because the Bard is no longer a teller of ancient tales. He's definitely the musical type bard, and he has a couple of things, like he has a chance to know some random lore trivia or something like that. But he's basically this kind of scoundrel musician type. He now has abilities that affect other people socially. So this is then the beginning of social mechanics and social combat in D&D, which is also a very, very big problem. It doesn't really hit full flower until third edition, where the Bard in terms of kind of its social impact stays more or less the same as the second edition Bard, but it now has the ability to tap fully into the really horrific social interaction rules, the social skills and things like that appear in third edition and D20 system. These are rules I've already talked against. You can see my earlier videos where I talk about social skills. You'll probably see future videos where I talk about them too. And so, the Bard is used there to be the master of social skill magic, because all social skills really were magic there, but he's especially literally being a magic guy that manipulates people socially. And this is bad because social skills are bad, right? So the Bard was really more like just a vehicle for this bigger problem, but it was still a problem. Then in 5th edition, you've got the Bard continuing on those veins, though now the skill system has somewhat changed, but they still have, all of this stuff that they can do that allows for social manipulation as a direct technique, and as social skill or social combat, as it were. And then you have, in terms of setting, the Bard is now the the goofy 2019 polyamorous person that is oh my god so random, right? So it adds to the problem I've also already talked about of how in 5th edition the people in charge of 5th edition demand that every fantasy world actually just be 2019 Seattle in drag, right? It's just like a fantasy version of the same society with the same morals, the same way of talking, the same way of acting, the same oh my god so random stuff, and all of this anachronism of the 21st century showing up in fantasy settings or medieval settings, which is fine in some settings. You could do that if you wanted a kind of gonzo sort of game. That's for example something that can happen, right? I sometimes have some anachronisms in my gonzo games. But if it's something that is hard-boiled into the rules, right, into the implied setting of the rules, then suddenly you've got a system where the setting is always going to be that, right? And more we're seeing this in Wizards of the Coast. It's not just a problem of the Bard, but the Bard and how people have been playing Bard in 5th edition, where the Bard is the class of sexual liberation. that creates that is one part of that problem, right? It creates part of the entrenchment of that in the implied setting, which is a problem not because I'm a fuddy-duddy or something, but because it means that a setting can't be anything else. You can't have that if you have the Bard, right? So anyways, this is my short video where I just wanted to tell you guys why I think Bards suck. Feel free to comment, agree or even disagree with me. Maybe you wanted to provide a defense of how, in fact, the Bard's effect on D&D has somehow been positive. I would love to see an argument trying to explain why the Bard has done a damn bit of good for D&D, because I can't see it. So, yeah. Feel free to share this video everywhere. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you want to help me out, I've got a Patreon page, and I've got a PayPal page, but maybe the best way you can help me out and get something for yourself at the same time is to purchase my products, right? Whether it's book products like Lion and Dragon and Old School Companion, or just my smaller PDFs like the RPG Pundit Presents series, where you're going to find 100 different small supplements of stuff that you can put directly into your old school or D&D based game that will be cool for you and will be giving me a tip, a bit of money to encourage me to keep up the good work. So that's I would suggest the best way to push me forward in my campaign against Bards. And again, be sure to check out on Sunday. If you're not already a member, subscribe to Inappropriate Characters, the channel. I'm sure you'll find it if you connect it, if you do a search with that and RPG Pundit or something like that. I might even have it in the description, I don't know. And yeah, be sure to subscribe and check out our live stream on Sunday. That's everything for today. Currently smoking Lord Zedekiet plus Argento Latakia.